Live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Sonali Basak.
And from our studios in Washington, D.C., I'm Kaylee Lyons. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto, a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance, which looks different today as spot Bitcoin ETFs make their long-awaited trading debut, a landmark moment that broadens access to the largest cryptocurrency.
And in a few minutes, we're going to talk to Grayscale CEO Michael Sonnenshein. He's going to join us after his firm's legal fight against the SEC had opened the door for his Bitcoin trust to trade as a spot Bitcoin ETF, opening the door for many others.
Yeah, of course, it's not just Grayscale with such a product, Sonali. 10 others are part of the fee-slashing race to stand out among the crowd. We'll speak with one of them, Franklin Templeton's Sandy Kaul. So all of that is ahead, but first let's get a snapshot of the market, the price action on this first day of trading in the U.S. of spot Bitcoin products. It's interesting to see Bitcoin now around $46,400 or so, not where we were shortly ago, and I'll show you the intraday action in just a minute, but interesting to see Ether actually outperforming. The conversation has moved towards what could come next. Now that spot Bitcoin ETFs are here, could a spot ETH ETF be in the future? It's up by about 2.7%. Interesting, though, to see some of those Bitcoin proxies moving lower in terms of different equities. MicroStrategy, of course, one of the biggest ones because it holds so much Bitcoin on its balance sheet, is actually down by about 4.25%. And Coinbase, the largest public exchange, is down by about 5.5%. A lot of questions around what this development might mean for Coinbase in particular. But let's get back to that chart of Bitcoin, because at one point today, we were at $49,000, the highest level going back to early 2022. We're talking around 2 years here. But right after we broke through that level, we basically went right back down. So maybe some technical contributions to this intraday move, Sonali, but right now we're only higher by about 1% on the day.
Listen, Kaylee, this day was always going to be choppy, but if you take a look at the volumes, this will tell you why. You see the two biggest traders of the day here. You see GBTC, now an ETF, as well as BlackRock's Bitcoin spot ETF being the two biggest gainers on the day in terms of volumes traded of the spot ETF. Here's the price as well, and you're seeing them fluctuate on the day so far, but generally you have seen some price movement in interesting directions higher. Of course, many of these are trading for the first time, except for GBTC, which was a conversion. Now, there's a big question mark about that because there are flows involved here to talk about, and we don't get that flow data until later today into tomorrow, and we'll get a better sense of the selling pressure, if there is any, in any of these funds, particularly when we come to the action at GBTC, which is a big holder of Bitcoin in the market. So we'll keep an eye on that in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that tomorrow. But Sonali, the fact remains today, the beginning of trading of these products has been a decade in the making. And here are some of what our guests have had to say about it.
First wave of initial spot launches in the U.S.
Institutions really getting the green light now.
We see an aggressive commoditization of fees.
It's not just about chasing the lowest fee.
This is a critical stepping stone.
A stepping stone in terms of access.
The access that it provides to investors.
This is going to be a net positive.
Even going to 0.1 or 0.5% of a portfolio for institutions is going to be a price-moving event.
There's pent-up demand. Clients want this.
This one has taken so long.
We'll have to see where the market goes.
Joining us now is Sandy Kaul. She's the head of digital asset at Franklin Templeton, one of the 11 spot Bitcoin ETF issuers. What can you tell us about what you're seeing today in terms of new buyers into the ETF?
Today has been a super exciting session to watch the launch of these Bitcoin ETFs that, as you noted, have been so long in the making. We've seen great activity. The volumes have been really encouraging. When you compare this to the launches of other ETFs that have been high profile, like the gold ETF, it looks like we're on track for potentially a record day. And I think it's affirming a lot of the thinking that there is pent-up demand for these ETFs, but this is just day one, and there's going to be many more exciting days to come in the future as this product really starts to be more widely listed and as people start to get broader access.
When we think about broader access, there are a lot of questions about how much financial advisors will really be willing to come into the product. And you even see some of your rivals, you think Vanguard, not offering them at all. How much caution is there still when it comes to this asset class?
I think that there's still a lot of misunderstanding of this asset class, and I think a lot of the headlines from a decade ago or more still scare people. I think there's a lack of understanding around how much regulators around the world have been really putting their lens onto the crypto domain, setting rules that are going to help to create a more professional trading environment, and how they have really learned to adapt their regulatory systems to monitor the wallets that are trading Bitcoin to ensure that there aren't bad actors coming into this space. So I think that a lot of people's reticence results from old headlines. And I think that as they understand that this ETF is going to create much more easy access, the real technology innovation potential of the underlying ecosystem, Bitcoin and all the coins that Bitcoin influences, that's a whole new area of innovation that we've never really been able to have adequately represented in our portfolios because we've always had to use proxies. We've never been able to really put an allocation in for the direct coin because there were risks in going into the crypto domain. And this vehicle really helps to eliminate some of those risks. So it should really open up a lot of investment capital for this space.
Well, at least to make investment in Bitcoin directly or indirectly easier, perhaps, Sandy. But the SEC was very specific, specifically Chair Gensler yesterday, in saying that this approval was not an endorsement of Bitcoin. Also, it applies only to Bitcoin, which they described as a non-security commodity. It raises the question of everything else. Would Franklin Templeton be willing to push the SEC on that? Are you thinking about different spot products potentially in the future?
Well, Franklin Templeton is a leader in the digital asset space. We have the first mutual fund ever listed, first public mutual fund ever listed on blockchain. We are very active in the domain. We have our own internal research. We publish our own thinking on these coins. This is something that we're committed to as an organization and have really believed in for many years now because we see the potential of this whole crypto domain. So we will continue to evolve our product range and continue to offer our investors more opportunities to access this innovation and capture the beta of what we call this new protocol economy.
But what would you start with? ETH? Something else? Another altcoin?
Oh, I would say two, but I think that you can anticipate that you will see more filings coming from us at some point.
How soon can they come, Sandy? I think, you see a market seeing today get through the window and a lot of excitement already build around other assets.
Yeah, well, I think that's a normal progression path, right? I mean, there are many coins that have hit large market caps within the space. And why stop with just Bitcoin, right? I mean, there are other opportunities. They are different opportunities. Ethereum is another asset in the crypto domain that offers a slightly different value proposition than Bitcoin because it's more of an app development platform and it fosters its own ecosystem. So that's a slightly different investment proposition than Bitcoin. And, in all portfolio theory, it's better to have multiple assets in a portfolio rather than a single asset portfolio. So it would not be reasonable to expect that Bitcoin is going to be the only asset that moves into vehicles that make it easier for investors to put their money into this space.
Earlier in your career, you had a career in the commodities markets here. And a lot of people that are thinking about this ETF will liken it to something like, okay, digital gold. It is like an ETF that would be backed by gold, but now instead backed by Bitcoin. Do you agree with that categorization?
I think that there's a truth to that because there is this digital scarcity programmed into Bitcoin where you only get 21 million coins ever going to be created. And you can track every one of those coins, and it is through a decentralized process. So no one can control that supply. So I think there's some good analogies that can be drawn to the gold situation. And I think that the volatility that you see in the Bitcoin markets are often similar to the volatility that you will see in commodity markets. And responsible trading firms like Franklin Templeton know how to handle that type of volatility. And we get into these markets every day on behalf of our investors. So I think that this is a great opportunity for them. And there is a lot that they can relate to with this investment, even if they don't understand Bitcoin itself.
Well, we were just showing Sandy finally our fees, the fees up there on our board. Obviously, a lot of you came out of this gate at one time, 11 in total. There are some issuers who have decided to waive a fee entirely for a certain span of time, and they're lower already than Franklin Templeton when the fees actually do kick in. How long are you going to give it? What kind of flow data do you need to see before you decide whether or not you need to reassess that 29 basis points?
We're already in conversation with our investors to really understand what they are looking for from this moment in time. As I said, today is day one, and it's super exciting, but this is not the only day in the horse race. So I think that this is something that we will be examining, and I think that you will hear news from us on this front when we feel it's appropriate. But, you know, our EasyBC product to us is something that is really exciting and it's new. We're seeing lots of engagement online and through our social media with our new laser Ben logo that we put out to celebrate the launch of our Bitcoin ETF today. So we're really just excited to be in the game and looking forward to seeing how this opens up the space and how we're going to build our volumes over time.
All right. Well, Sandy, we were excited to have you today. So thank you very much for joining us. That's Sandy Kaul of Franklin Templeton.
Thank you, guys.
And still coming up on the program, Michael Sonnenshein will join the show to discuss how all of this impacts Grayscale's business, because frankly, Sonali, they started this all.
And then we're going to talk about another pioneer. Jeremy Allaire's Circle is trying to go public for the second time since 2022.
And of course, to access all of the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the terminal. This is Bloomberg.
The chair is right to point out that this is specific to a particular set of products, but obviously precedent matters, and so you look at the reasoning, and people will do this. They'll look at the reasoning in the order, and they'll seek to apply it to other facts and circumstances as appropriate. So I think the only thing I will say is that one of my complaints in this area has been that we haven't always stuck with precedent when it comes to these kinds of exchange-traded products. We haven't necessarily applied the same standards that we do with respect to other kinds of exchange-traded products, but it is a precedent people will point to.
That was SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce speaking with me yesterday here on Bloomberg after the approval of spot Bitcoin ETFs. Joining us now, I'm pleased to say, is Michael Sonnenshein. He is CEO of Grayscale, not just one of the 11 issuers of one of these spot products. He actually had GBTC converted into this, but really, arguably, what started this all. So, Michael, thank you very much for joining us. If you just look at the language in Gary Gensler's statement about the approval, he specifically points to the Grayscale case and says that changed the circumstances, why he felt it was the most sustainable path forward to approve the listing and trading of these ETPs. How does it feel?
Well, it is definitely a historic day. I mean, joining you guys live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, you know, this is the culmination of 10 years of work. It's a huge thank you at this moment to our investors for being patient, supporting us. A huge thank you to the Grayscale team. Looking back on the last couple of years, making the decision to sue our regulator, to have that unanimous victory in court, and to then all of that come to fruition and actually have GBTC uplist on New York Stock Exchange as the world's second largest commodity ETF is just such a historic moment and such a milestone. So thrilled, feeling really good today.
Second largest commodity ETF and the largest crypto fund already in the world for Bitcoin. How do you go around then, Michael, attracting new assets to this ETF form? What do your conversations with clients look like today?
Well, I think what's really exciting about this day really is that you're now going to have 11 different spot Bitcoin ETFs on the market. And, you know, GBTC has really paved the way for a lot of those other products to come to market. GBTC will be differentiated though, right? It came to market with $28 billion of assets, tremendous, tremendous liquidity. We're seeing that play out even further today on the New York Stock Exchange, but it won't necessarily be everything to all investors. And so some investors may look for these products that are super, super low cost, and that's what's most important to them. To other investors, the fact that GBTC has a 10-year track record, billions of dollars of AUM, that liquidity profile, brought to you by a crypto specialist, that'll be some of the differentiators that attract them as well. But it's a little too early to see how it's all going to play out.
Michael, when we look at the Bitcoin price action today, we jumped up to 49,000 and we're back down barely above 46,000 now. Coming into today, a lot of investors were concerned about potential selling pressure out of GBTC. What are you experiencing in terms of flows?
Yeah, well, last time I checked, GBTC was one of the only ETFs that was positive on the day, right? And so we had a really successful and smooth uplisting to NYSE ARCA. Last I checked, the notional trading volume had already eclipsed well above $1.5 billion notionally today. So the volumes have been really, really strong.
Well, obviously that's for GBTC, which has taken up so much attention for this very reason about your attempts to convert it to the spot Bitcoin ETF, what it would mean for everyone else. But to go back to what we were just hearing from Commissioner Peirce, this approval was very narrow, very specific to these Bitcoin products. Grayscale has plenty of other products out there. You've got an Ether Trust, Litecoin, Solana as well, I believe. Are you going to pick a fight with the SEC about any of those, try to make any of those spot ETFs, Michael?
Well, I think you guys know our business model pretty well, and we're pretty transparent about it. We do have a family of 17 different digital asset products that are each at one stage of a very prescribed 4-phase life cycle. GBTC is the first of those products to get to stage 4 to uplist as a spot Bitcoin ETF. Last year, we already filed to uplist our Ethereum product, the Grayscale Ethereum Trust, to a spot Ethereum ETF. And we really believe that GBTC can really pave the way for the rest of that product family to continue along that 4-phase life cycle. And ultimately, you'll see from the Grayscale family an entire suite of digital asset or crypto-focused ETFs.
Wait, so if you want to see an Ethereum ETF, for example, how soon do you think something like that could happen? To Kaylee's point, the SEC was also very clear that this was just an approval for Bitcoin-related ETPs and did not, in fact, they were kind of critical about the crypto industry in their statement.
Well, you know, I do think one of the things that we have to look at and how we got to this historic outcome was the fact that the SEC was treating the Bitcoin futures-based products differently than the Bitcoin spot-based products like GBTC. You know, the fact that, you know, we now have that, you know, similar situation with Ethereum futures-based ETFs, but not Ethereum spot, may portend that we may have similar arguments that surround the eventual uplisting or approval of spot Ethereum products in the market. We do have a market of significant size on the CME for Ethereum, and I think that's a really important point and another really important validation for how crypto as an asset class is here to stay.
Now, I'm curious about the fee structure. Michael, you know, I ask you about this every time. It has been the biggest question in town when it comes to Grayscale and GBTC. Was the calculus that you'd rather keep the fee at 1.5% and even face potential outflows because of it, with others competing on fees, rather than try to compete in the race to zero for ETFs here?
Well, I think for us, first of all, like I've always told you, Sonali, it's always going to be that we were going to reduce fees, and we made good on that commitment. We reduced fees by 25%. Other issuers coming into the market with no assets, no trading volumes, no base of investors, we're really coming out of the gate offering incentives to get investors into their funds. I do think GBTC, like we've seen in other ETF categories, is really that specialist, that first to market with the AUM, with the trading volume, with the track record that does command a higher fee. And I think we're now seeing that now for spot Bitcoin products, the way we've seen it in other parts of the ETF ecosystem.
And I think this is a really important differentiation. You talked about flow volumes earlier. Flows can mean inflows or outflows. What are you seeing in terms of directions either way, net flows at this point in time?
I think it's too early to say. Since GBTC has been trading since 2015, we've had investors come into our fund and out of our fund every single day, hundreds of thousands of investors across all 50 states. I think the same will be true with GBTC now as an ETF.
And finally, Michael, obviously this concludes what had been a long litigation mess that Grayscale, if you will, had to be involved in with the SEC. But there is other litigation I want to ask you about, because obviously Alameda has involved Grayscale in a $4 billion suit, essentially seeking $4 billion in value for Grayscale shareholders. Now that these spot ETF products are approved, how does that change that legal issue for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to, comment on ongoing litigation. But what I will say is that we have fulfilled the promise that we made to investors, which was getting GBTC uplisted as a spot Bitcoin ETF. And that all came true this very morning.
Michael, what's next? What does the next couple of days look like to you? Are you running around looking for new assets here? Are you planning on cutting your fees once more?
Well, I'll tell you, the last few days have almost really been a blur. Having a lot of conversations with folks like yourselves, speaking a lot with our investors. We're hearing an outpouring of support from the investment community, really thanking the Grayscale team for forging ahead, for doing the tough work to go up against the regulator, knowing that we had sound arguments. And that really has paved the way for the outcome that we've now achieved here today.
Grayscale's Michael Sonnenshein, we thank you so much for your time on this historic day. I know a lot of the crypto industry is pointing to you for the reason that this is all happening today. So we'll like to have you back on the next set of ETFs. Now coming up, we're going to thank you. Now coming up, we're going to talk about Jeremy Allaire's pursuit at Circle, which is confidentially submitting plans to launch an initial public offering. Another big moment for the public markets in crypto. More on that next. This is Bloomberg.
What it really tells you is that from a regulatory point of view, there's been some maturing of the Bitcoin markets to the point where the SEC has now said, we approve these new vehicles that allow retail investors to access Bitcoin. They don't have to actually buy underlying Bitcoin, but they can have an opinion about the trends in Bitcoin, and they can express themselves in a regulated market.
NASDAQ Chair and CEO Adena Friedman speaking last night at CES. And in other big news for digital asset adoption, Circle said it confidentially submitted plans to launch an IPO. And that comes 2 years after scrapping plans to go public via a SPAC. The $25 billion stablecoin provider filed a draft registration statement with the SEC today. Circle's valuation was estimated at $9 billion when it tried to go public, Kaylee, in 2022. Fascinating moment, because now we're going from Bitcoin to stablecoins, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's still a lot of clarity that the stablecoin market may need from a regulatory standpoint as well, although arguably there's still plenty of regulatory questions around broader crypto space as right now, even though we do have now at least spot ETFs here in the U.S. beginning trading today. So thank you very much for joining us on this special edition of Bloomberg Crypto to mark this milestone. Of course, we'll be back next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. This is Bloomberg.